We do want to turn now to the other top story of the day. As the White House contends with the Israel-Hamas war and the risk of escalating tensions with Iran, all as President Biden faces domestic pressure over his handling of the war. In a sign of renewed urgency facing the administration, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to leave today for his fourth trip to the region since the war began. Meanwhile, White House national security officials are meeting to discuss a potential U.S. military response to Iranian-backed attacks in the Red Sea. Houthi militants have launched 25 attacks on commercial ships since mid-November, including one today. The U.S. Navy has repeatedly shot down Houthi drones and missiles, and earlier this week sunk 3 Houthi boats in a dramatic confrontation, killing crew members. So on the table, according to 2 current administration officials, U.S. strikes on Houthi targets inside Yemen. Yesterday, the White House addressing the rising tensions.
The United States does not seek conflict with any nation or actor in the Middle East, nor do we want to see the war between Israel and Hamas widen in the region. But neither will we shrink from the task of defending ourselves, our interests, our partners, or the free flow of international commerce. It wasn't the United States who decided to attack commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The Houthis did that. And who are the Houthis backed by? Iran. As I've said before, Iran provided the missiles that the Houthis are using. We are simply in a defensive posture to try to protect that commercial shipping.
Now, this all comes amid concerns of escalation with other Iranian proxies, including Hezbollah, as a U.S. envoy is headed to Lebanon to try to diffuse tensions after an apparent Israeli strike killed a Hamas leader in Beirut. And then there's the fallout of a pair of deadly blasts in Iran yesterday that killed 85 and injured nearly 300. An ISIS-affiliated group is now claiming responsibility. Iran has tried to blame Israel and the United States, despite evidence suggesting neither country was involved. Meanwhile, the U.S. is pressuring Israel to do more to protect civilians inside Gaza. Today, the State Department saying Secretary Blinken is ready for difficult conversations with his counterparts.
We don't expect every conversation on this trip to be easy. There are obviously tough issues facing the region and difficult choices ahead. But the Secretary believes it is the responsibility of the United States of America to lead diplomatic efforts to tackle those challenges head on, and he is prepared to do that in the days to come. But we have been working very hard in this building, throughout the administration, and quietly with allies and partners in the region and throughout the world on what the day after ought to look like. Those are going to be some of the toughest conversations, of course, but we're ready to go pursue them.
Meanwhile, at home, the president faces pushback over his handling of the conflict as a senior education official resigned and campaign staffers signed an anonymous letter protesting his approach to the war. Joining me now is our team of reporters. Courtney Kube is at the Pentagon, Ali Rafa is at the White House, and Josh Letterman is on the ground in Tel Aviv. And Court, I want to start with you and your exclusive reporting that the Biden administration is considering potential options for strikes against the Houthis. What do you make of these discussions? What are the key takeaways in the fact that this has risen to the White House level?
So it's indicative of the fact that this is getting the White House's attention. There's no question about that. And it's not just the threat to commercial shipping, which we have seen, as you mentioned, 25 attacks by Houthis into the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb in just over a month's time. Now, the U.S. set up this new maritime mission called Operation Prosperity Guardian. And we heard from the head of U.S. naval forces in the region, Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, earlier today. He said that since that task force was stood up on December 18th, even though there have been 1,500 merchant ships, commercial ships that have transited through that area, none of the Houthi attacks, including missiles and drones, have been successful. None have actually struck any of those ships. But, Kristen, the attacks have continued, including the one today that you mentioned, which showed a new capability for the Houthis. They've used drones, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles, but this was actually a sea-based drone. So an unmanned drone that went, according to Brad Cooper, Admiral Cooper, it left Yemen, it transited out 15 miles, and then it detonated. Now, fortunately, it wasn't near any ships at the time, so it caused no damage, no injuries. But it does show that the Houthis are continuing to try to conduct these attacks against ships. That is why the White House is addressing this, coming up with potential options that include not only what they are doing with this maritime task force, but also the potential for strikes inside of Yemen against Houthi targets. And what's really critical here, Kristen, is they are attempting to build more of a coalition. There's a coalition at sea, but they want a coalition that would be helpful or would be responsible for these sorts of attacks. Partners like the British and the U.S. military potentially working together if, in fact, they decide to move forward with these offensive attacks against the Houthis in Yemen, Kristen.
It's really fantastic reporting, Courtney. I know you'll continue to track that angle. You're also watching the fallout after that strike in Baghdad. What more do you know about that? And, Courtney, you and I have been talking about since the beginning of this war the concerns within the administration that there could be a wider war. What is the concern level at this point, particularly in the wake of yet another attack in Baghdad?
Yeah, and your lead-in just showed all. I mean, the fact that it is really it is all over the region right now. Baghdad is really interesting, though, Kristen, because this is one of the first times that we know of anywhere where the U.S. has taken a strike like this against an Iranian-backed militia member leader since Qasem Soleimani, which was almost exactly 4 years ago today. This was someone who the U.S. is saying he was a member of one of these Iranian-backed groups, but the Iraqis have come out very hard condemning this action. In fact, saying that these are the kinds of actions that terrorists would take and really condemning the strike. They are saying that, in fact, this individual was a part of what they call the Popular Mobilization Forces. So essentially under the arm, the broad umbrella of the Iraqi military. So this is a very controversial strike here today, Kristen.
All right. Courtney Kube covering all of the angles for us. Courtney, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.